Welcome back as we journey through the book of Revelation in really discovering the heart of the bridegroom for his bride. Once again, I must emphasize that when we read through the book of Revelation, that we read it as the marriage of the bride and her bridegroom. If we only look at it from the place of judgment, or we get caught up with certain spectacular, gruesome moments, we're going to lose the real heart of what Revelation is all about. So, if you remember at the last teaching, I asked you a question. Why does Jesus appear from behind towards John? And we will address that in today's teaching. So let's turn in our Bibles to Revelation chapter 1, and we're going to read from verse 12. Then I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me, and turning, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and in the midst of the lampstands, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a long robe, and with a golden sash around his chest. The hairs of his head were white, like white wool, like snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet like burnished bronze, refined in a furnace. And his voice was like the roar of many waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars. From his mouth came a sharp two-edged sword. And his face was like the sun shining in full strength. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. But he laid his right hand on me, saying, "Fear not, for I am the first and the last." We now go into some deep symbolism. Here we see Jesus being described from head to toe in various aspects. I think I mentioned this previously, that when we see Jesus in the Gospels, we see the humble Savior. But when we see Jesus in Revelation, we see the awesome and mighty King. So Jesus speaks to John from behind and not face to face. If you remember, even in the Old Testament, Moses wanted to speak to God face to face, but he was given a glimpse of his back. And I think, sometimes if we are given a direct glimpse of the awesome majesty of Christ, we may not be able to contain it. And I think that's my thinking, even why John needed to hear Jesus from behind, and then he turned and looked. And as he looked, the first thing that he saw were the 7 golden lampstands, and where the Son of Man, who is Christ, was standing among the lampstands. Now, what are the golden lampstands? Each of the lampstands represents a church. And in the context of Revelation, it is the 7 churches that the message of Revelation was being initially sent across to. See, that is an encouragement for us to know that Jesus is in the midst of his church. He's not disconnected from the church, but he is there amongst the church. And he was standing with them. And that's the first thing that John saw, that the Jesus who was resurrected had not abandoned his church. He's always in love with his church because his church is his bride. So he's always among her and being there to care for her, to guide her, and to lead her. And, he sees these lampstands, and, each of the lampstands has to do something. And that is to bring out light in a dark world. That's what we have been called. Jesus told us, he said, you are the light of this world. He is the light of the world. But then in the Gospel of Matthew, he also referred to the people and said, you are the light of the world. Because when his light shines in the church then shines his light into the world. And John begins by saying that he was clothed in a long robe and a golden sash around his chest. Now, the long robe represents the Old Testament high priest, or the garment the high priest was wearing. Even kings used to wear a long robe. For example, King Saul, Jonathan, they would wear these long robes. King David, the Levites, the priests. So we see here a symbolism of Jesus wearing this long robe that represents him being a priest, and not just a priest. He is a high priest, as Hebrews says. We have a high priest who understands what we go through, but also it represents his kingship. Jesus, our King, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Through the robe, there is a righteousness that is represented. He is our mediator. He is our advocate. He is our high priest who offers intercession on our behalf before the throne of God. So Jesus was wearing also a golden sash around his chest. Now, a golden sash would usually be worn by someone in the military. If you've been to a military function, you see, and especially an official, like a dinner, you will see that there will be many military officers who would come wearing a sash. But here Jesus wears a golden sash, and it talks about, gold talks about royalty. It talks about divine. It talks about kingship. So Jesus is wearing this sash even to denote of the person of rank, the high priest or the king, in wearing that sash. Next, John describes his hair, and he says that the hairs on his head were white like wool, like snow. It was pure, it was bright, and I believe his hair is a representation of his majesty, of his purity, and of his eternal existence. And then we go on to his eyes, and he says his eyes were like a flame of fire. Wow. Seeing that would be so magnificent, but I wonder it would be scary as well. And his eyes and the flaming fire really represents that nothing can be hidden from him. And we will see when we read some of the letters to the churches how he sees through and through. Nothing can be hidden from him. There are no secrets. His knowledge of all secrets, of all hearts, and the most, in the most hidden places, he sees. And there's a piercing there, like the flames of fire. There's a piercing that he breaks away every deception. He breaks away every lie. He breaks down every pretense and brings into reality, brings into a revelation of what the situation is. And, for his faithful servants, his eyes are a revelation, and, he reveals things. But also to his enemies, to those who walk in evil, his eyes are a judgment.